Live stream? I don't want to live stream. All right. So look, yeah. Hi, Connor. Look, thanks a lot for joining us today. Look, really appreciate you taking your time, especially on a busy Friday. Just to give you a bit of context, I'm creating and running a series of kind of like videos around kind of real people doing real jobs in tech. One of the feedback I get from students and people that I coach is that it's really hard to kind of get an honest, authentic, what do the jobs really look like? And yeah, and very kindly you've agreed to kind of give us a run through of what you do and some of your ideas on the market and where AI is going and things like that. So look, just to kind of kick us off, could you give us some kind of like an idea of where are you working at the moment, what's the role that you're actually doing, and a rough idea of what your day to day might look like.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, I work at Google. I work with on the ad side of the business. So I work in an organization called GTech, and GTech is kind of like you could probably call it like a sales support organization. So obviously, Google will have a bunch of people employed to selling advertising space across properties like YouTube, search, so on and so forth. And GTech is essentially there to help some of these advertisers and these agencies and partners um, in order to execute marketing tech problems normally, like sort of technical problems with the ad platforms, or sort of maybe opportunities where they can use the ad platforms that Google have, and they can combine those with like sort of tech platforms like Google Cloud Platform or Gemini, ADK, various amounts of like uh, things in the Google tech stack. So basically, we are helping these advertisers to make a bridge between those two things and help them always with the idea of solving business problems, usually marketing problems. So helping them to grow sales via Google advertising, or to do their Google advertising in a more efficient way.
Okay, beautiful. So do you spend a lot of your time kind of with clients and things like that, or I think as you're a solutions architect, or are you more on the strategy side and building out?
Yeah, so no, most of us, so a lot of people in my team would spend it with clients, but I'm actually assigned to agencies and partners. So yeah, a lot of our big clients in Australia also have agencies and partners, whether they're media agencies or tech partner agencies, and I'm assigned to those agencies and partners in order to help them when they are doing that type of Google marketing on behalf of their clients.
Okay, interesting. So you've been working at Google for a while now. You've currently recently done a course at the Wagon. What was the course, and kind of, you're already working in tech, you already have a background in tech. What was it that kind of motivated you at this stage to make that decision, yeah, to kind of do it?
Yeah, so I took the data science course, and I did that when I was 31 years old. So it was 2 years ago now. Yeah, and I already had like 8 to 9 degrees, or 8 to 9 years, sorry, experience in the marketing agency across like media agencies, some startups as well before I came to Google. I think naturally along the way on that journey, I moved from starting out like working in those ad platforms myself on the media side, and picked up like tech skills along the way. So um, yeah, at startups, for example, I was involved, like sort of introduced to working across functional teams with engineers and data scientists, and then also picking up some SQL. And I think it was like a combination of that journey, like working more closely with those engineers, those data scientists, um, also having to use SQL, because at the time I was working at a business where we had to query like tens of millions of rows related to Google Ads keywords. It's a combination of those two factors, and then also the kind of trend in the ad industry, where a lot of that daily optimization workflow, even or as far back as 2016, 2017, 2018, was increasingly being automated. So all of these factors kind of led me to consider like upskilling, and to move from a sort of position where I would execute data analysis using some technical skills to a position where I could actually train my own models, or use models out of the box to solve more complicated business analytical problems. I think the last thing I'd say is, as well, is I did also have friends at the time who also did Wagon before me. They did it in the field of software development, and that kind of gave me like sort of the path and the ready-made example that kind of inspired me also to do so.
Yeah, awesome. So what was the problem you were trying to solve for Connor? What was it? What was the kind of, the real kind of like driving factors that you were like, okay, I need to, or I want to do this?
Yeah, so like a lot of the time, I guess so most of the technical skills that I picked up before the course were actually at this company, GetYourGuide. They're a tech travel company in Germany, and I was embedded within the marketing team there. But as I said, it was a cross-functional team, so a lot of the types of business problems that we would focus on would be like marketing automation around the management of like paid search or paid social campaigns, so whether it's on Google or Meta, um, and also display advertising campaigns. So some of the typical business problems we look at solving are like, at scale, how do you find the right bids that you want to bid on your paid search Google campaigns? Like, you're going to need a model to do that. Well, how do you build that model? And do you have the right model? And how do you then like test that model to ensure that it's configured properly and it's better than anything you can get like out of the box? Other types of marketing automation problems that we would have worked on would have just been around like, how do you manage like tens of millions of keywords, or a catalog of thousands of tourist activities on the site? Like, how do you manage the feed for that on something like a Meta? So it's like all those different types of sort of implementation marketing automation questions. Like, when you've got lots of entities, how do you do that stuff in a way without having lots of human headcount there manually, uploading stuff to ad platforms? And then also there's like data science questions around like, if you are going to build models to do stuff like bidding in an automated way, like, how should you approach that?
Yeah. So sounds like you're just trying to make your life easier, automate everything, become more effective and more efficient, and yeah, got you to Google. So well done on that one. I think one of the questions that, kind of like people that are looking to get into tech or transition or even just upskilling in general. What was your first thought of tech before you were a techie? What did you imagine it was actually going to be like?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of preconceptions. I suppose I sort of like fell into it. I'd GetYourGuide. I suppose when I then made the next move, I guess from a sort of more a tech startup to big tech in itself, right, to one of the FANG companies, I did expect that sort of everything would already be, I'd get to Google and everything would already be sorted, kind of everything would already be super automated. And I think like the reality is that any organization that is that big, um, different parts of the organization operate in different ways. And actually, I was surprised to see that there was still a lot of space and opportunity to do a lot of get involved in a lot of cool um, sort of problems and topics around like automating a lot of operations, particularly on the ad side of the business, and also maybe dog fooding or using our own the tech that we come up with as a company in order to streamline like how we actually work.
Wow. Okay. So on the basis of that, so you didn't really have any preconceived ideas of kind of, what tech would be like. Sounds like you had an idea that you'd move in and everything would be beautiful and unicorns flying around. Yep, I think that's the picture I have as Google as well. When did you kind of start to go, actually, it's not about the kind of tools or the code, it's actually about your approach, your thinking, doing things and using your kind of skills and experience that you had before?
Yeah, so I think I think I realized at the beginning of my journey, like when I was picking up some tech skills, which, as I said, started with SQL, right? I was doing a lot of data analysis, and I just kind of viewed like coding as one like lump thing, right? That
Yep.
people do. I did not have any appreciation for how different like the experience of coding for data science related purposes and data analysis purposes is versus like software development, right? It's only like later on down the line when I started to kind of dabble at both things to figure out like what I wanted to like focus on that I realized that and I also on top of this, I did some basic like coding courses online, the free stuff, just so many of them, and they're really good for learning the syntax of coding. But you don't really get an appreciation for as you kind of mentioned, I think in your question, like how you have to think, and the hard part is not learning the syntax. The hard part really is like you have to think in a certain way when you develop a product. Um, you have to understand like really well what the objective is, really well what the assumptions are, really like just structuring logic like for a computer to read and understand is just like so different from how you would communicate to another human brain, right? So
Yep.
there's like no room for kind of assumed context. You have to be super precise with everything. I think this is maybe slightly changing now that we have like LLMs and we're starting to have agents, but involved in the software development process. But nevertheless, like yeah, the trickier thing is always in whether it's data science in terms of like thinking really about like, okay, does the model I have that I've got here actually makes sense for the assumptions and the limitations of the data that I may have, or whether it's on the software development side and you're thinking, okay, well, um, yeah, how do I structure this logic in a way that it's not going to be buggy, or in a way that the computer is really going to understand what the ultimate objective is? This is like very very hard, and it's not hard to do is go and rip off a bunch of syntax or go and get a model off the internet that you can use, and anyone can do that fairly easily, but it's really more in the understanding whether that's like right for the problem that you may have.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the problem with AI at the moment, isn't it? Everyone's kind of just using tools that are created or creating something, but not really understanding how to use it. So awesome. So solutions architect as a title. As you're aware, I'm not a techie, so it sounds very kind of James Bond mysterious. If I met you in a bar or something, you said solutions architect, I think you'd be paid, $1 million a year to do very little. Could you explain it in a real kind of simple way for someone like myself to really just kind of understand what the thrux of it is?
Yeah, I certainly would struggle to see myself in a James Bond movie, and I wish I earned $1 million a year, but that's still, yeah, haven't yet hit that threshold. Yeah, so solutions architect in the look, I think in the tech industry, one thing that's like common, and it's not just the solutions architect title, is you'll find different titles for different roles everywhere, and there's no consistency, right? And that is
Yeah.
like a tricky thing to navigate. I can tell you though what the solutions architect title means in the context of GTech at Google, and that is that we are really just tech at the heart of it, tech consultants, right? So if you think if maybe if you're already aware of some of the Google ad platforms, maybe you're not, but Google, if you just look at like some of the ad platforms that they have, they probably have like about three or four major ones. So you've got Google Ads, you've got DV360, you've got CM360, you've got SA360, and then they've got Google Cloud Platform, right, which has so many different services in it. And we've also got Gemini now, and Gemini is in so many different forms, right? It's like can be part of Workspace, so Gmail and Docs and all that stuff. It can also be part of the ad platforms themselves. It can also be part of Google Cloud Platform. There's a lot of technology that a company like Google puts out and is continuing to put out, and that creates a lot of complexity for advertisers. So these big companies that want to advertise with Google, or their agencies or partners that I mentioned I directly work with. So we are at the heart tech consultants who are supposed to have like solid tech fundamentals, can understand like a wide range of problems, so probably more towards the generalist side of things than the specialist side of things, and be able to like deep dive on a wide range of like platforms and Google products to help solve some sort of marketing problem, usually at the end of the day for an advertiser or an agency. So that can involve like concretely, that can involve like a lot of consulting with them. Like maybe they see two or three, often they'll see two or three different ways that they could use Google technology to improve their advertising. And then it's about like sitting down with them and understanding, okay, which is actually the optimal method that you should use here. When they go to deploy any of these technologies, a lot of the time, right, they might hit some blockers, some errors, and that's when we are also there to help support that implementation. Yeah, that's essentially like the crux of the role. And what's most important about it is that you're just able to deep dive on these things and understand the business side of the client's problem, and then find the right like marketing solution to it using Google Tech.
Awesome. So I am going to say it does sound like James Bond. You've got all these cool like weapons at your disposal. I mean, I think the crux of it. So I've been doing a lot of research recently around kind of like roles of the future in tech, and it kind of sounds like yours is kind of sitting at the precipice of this, where you've kind of got to have that kind of consultative thinking. So understanding how to speak to the customer, the client, the problem you want to solve. You've then kind of got this kind of creative designer understanding the end user and the flow, and then you've got the ability to build as well, so speak to developers and things like that. So yeah, really interesting, because I think the way that the world is changing, these types of roles are going to become more prevalent. Whether it's a small business, you're going to need somebody with, you said generalist, I would probably say it's kind of like multi-hatted specialist that has the ability to kind of look holistically but also in the detail as well. So thank you. Now I kind of know what James Bond does. He's a solution architect. Beautiful. So if you were to kind of make this really simple, because a lot of people I speak to, they all want to be problem solvers. They all want to, what is the one problem you would say that you're really kind of paid? Well, it's not $1 million, unfortunately, but maybe you can have a chat after this. But what is it you're really paid to solve? What is the one problem that your role is really focused on?
Yeah, so I think most of the problems are marketing problems, right? So, and usually regarding advertisers. So it's usually always the ultimate aim is always to help these companies, with their marketing efficiency or with their marketing growth. So simply put, how do they deploy their investment, right, to in a marketing sense to grow their business? Whether it's, and it obviously depends then on the business what they want to grow, right? Whether it's like sales or goods, and what sort of vertical it's in. But it's generally always around, comes back to that.
Yeah. So basically, it's the complexity. Your role is to kind of take all of that complexity and deliver it in a way which aligns with kind of their needs, their requirements, and the problem that they need to solve. Okay, so that's a big role, James. Sorry, Connor. Beautiful. So looking back, what skills and capabilities have ended up mattering most for you, far more than maybe you expected?
So I think, like, so in terms of skills, do you mean?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
experiences. So probably more
Or
ones that
experiences?
maybe you
Yes.
brought along with you.
Yeah. So I think like the on the experiences front, I mean, just being forced to get my hands dirty and use some of this technology to actually solve problems. You can do like all the free online courses in the world at your own pace, but until you actually, it's like anything. Like if you learn it in theory, you have to like put it into practice, right? So uh, as with any task when you're learning, there's a certain amount of, you just must go through this process time and time again to pick up like a certain amount of like experiential learning on top of the theory that you have. And then I think like that's kind of related to like the skills and the that I would like most look for and I find personally like most important. And those skills are like just like a genuine motivation and desire to continually learn new things, because none of this tech is static, and in fact, all this tech is like changing so rapidly now that you need to like be constantly learning. And I think then on top of that, you want to have like the grit to see that learning process through, knowing that it's like not all, you don't learn, in a linear fashion where it's just going left to right, smoothly up, right? Sometimes you have to stick with things, and sometimes there are hard concepts to grasp. But if you have the grit to get through that, then yeah, I think you stand like a really good chance of for me, those are the most important ingredients. I think also having some solid like fundamentals in terms of like first principles thinking, being able to like, strong analytical skills, in terms of, and I don't necessarily mean with numbers, but just, being able to synthesize information, analyze it. These types of skills definitely help, but I would say it's really more on the like first two components, because now we are in a time where with the internet, like you can learn anything, and a lot of the time you can actually learn a lot of stuff for free even. But if you don't have the first two things, then you kind of never will take advantage of that.
Yeah, awesome. That leads perfectly into my next question. And this is a bit of a tough one, or maybe it's an easy one, I'm not sure. When someone joins your team, what makes you kind of go, this person gets it? Okay, they understand why they're here and what they need to do.
Yeah, so I think when somebody joins my team, it's probably as simple as, in my experience, at least at Google, like, so Google's a big organization, right? Whether it's tech or not tech, if you're in a big corporation, there is just so much, because of the size of it, so much potential for distraction, and communication becomes more difficult, right? Because you're in the numbers of thousands of humans that have to communicate to each other. So that brings with it a lot of complexity. And when I see like somebody new come into my team, um, I think they get it if they are able to minimize that noise and that distraction, and they're really able to focus and prioritize on the core element of the role, which, as we've kind of discussed in my role, is solving business problems for these clients, for these advertisers, for these agencies, usually related to marketing. If they can always put the interests of those organizations, those agencies, those clients, like keep that paramount,
Yeah,
and minimize the distraction and the noise, then I think they understand.
yeah. So what you're saying is someone who's coming there with kind of like self-awareness, they understand who they are, what their previous skills and experience and how it relates, and then kind of click it into new subject matter, new knowledge bank, new technical skills, rather than going there and going, well, actually, I'm here to learn and I need to learn new things, and kind of, yeah. So brilliant. So, and now we're going to go to future proofing. Okay, so if somebody wanted to properly future proof themselves in today's world, okay, and we've already identified that you've got the role of the future, so well done on that one. What advice would you give them? Skills and experience. What is it that they should be focusing at the moment on?
Yeah, so I would say, like, I think it's kind of like, um, contradictory in a way. Firstly, there's a lot of hype in the market at the moment, and a lot of future speculating, I would say. We obviously have this extremely powerful new technology, right? Probably, real, like, if we want to talk about like LLMs, then probably from like early 2023. This is like the radical shift, right? Um, I think like it's impossible. One thing I'll say is like it's impossible to really understand like how this technology will eventuate. There are so many different ways that it could go, and there's a lot of stuff that you'll read that is at the extreme ends of the different outcomes. I would say, putting that to one side though, that if you think about probably what won't change, um, in the case of business, right, you'll still have a lot of companies out there trying to sell a lot of services and goods. Um, and I think also what won't change on the skills front, like, is the people who are able to learn faster, who are more excited and therefore dedicate more time to learning new things, will have an advantage over those that don't. And the people who I think it's my belief that the people who still have those tech skills will have a significant advantage still over the people that don't. So there's hard technical skills. There's a view. So I think you can find, you can split the tech community at the moment in views in a lot of ways in two parts, right? One way you can split them in two parts is there's a narrative that says that because we now have LLMs and coding agents, you will never need to know how to actually code. You don't need to no longer know how to code, right? And to learn the kind of fundamentals behind software development or data science. And there is another part of the tech community that's saying that's not the case. If you still have these skills, you can do a lot more. I am of the second group, to be honest, in my beliefs and my opinions. Definitely, like LLMs will help people who have little to no coding experience start to do like product development themselves, and probably that will increasingly be so in the future. But you can only, if you are talking about like vibe coding, for example, with no code experience, so just prompting and coming up with the end product, you're limited to a lot of simple solutions. It can be some really good solutions, but you're limited in some ways in terms of complexity, and also in really understanding what you've developed, like being able to deep dive into the code and understanding what the LLM has actually written, and then being able to compare that with what you actually wanted as the output. So I think we're in a world now, paradoxically, where still you're never gonna need to code as much as we did before. You will use these agents. But paradoxically, still having those tech skills, those fundamentals, the ability to tweak, read, and write the code yourself gives you an inherent advantage, because there's a spectrum of vibe coding even, and being able to do what I just mentioned sort of enables you to vibe code a lot more effectively than somebody who doesn't have those skills.
Yeah. If anyone watches this back, remember this bit. To me, this is the most valuable bit. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and kind of, people that are just absolutely, they're calling it the gold rush. They know how to code, they know how to build, they've never been able to ship so fast. And yeah, so I'm with you. There's two sides of the coin. I always think the more negative side of the coin are the ones which are trying to sell you something, so AI, etc. The other side, I think, is about, okay, let's turn this narrative into opportunity. And I think the world has never been so opportunistic to, kind of get the opportunity for people to solve real problems cheaper. You don't need a team of 30, 60 devs anymore. You can have a team of 3 to 4, but you need to have multiple skills similar to multiple hats that you've been wearing. So yeah, I love that answer, because I think that's the way that people need to be viewing this, especially because there's a lot of problems still out there, and there's a lot of ways of fixing it if you know how to use AI and all the tools that are coming up. Okay. What does someone who knows how to use AI well do very differently to somebody who doesn't? And I think that kind of goes into the follow on from this question. So
Yeah, so one thing I'd say is, right, this form of AI has really only been around for the last few years, and in some instances it's only gotten very good at certain problems really in the last 6 to 12 months. So there's like a lot in that question that we are still really yet to like unpack and find out, and we cannot understand until we just like do it over and over again and kind of build up this sort of collective human knowledge on that. But like right now, like I think somebody who knows how to use AI well can definitely be more productive. But I think you gain like an understanding of, the more you use it, the limitations of it, and like when it's really good for certain problems, and maybe when it's like not so good for others, right? So as a concrete example, LLMs are very good at like, or I could think one of the large improvements that LLMs bring to problem solving is they're able to automate somewhat abstract problems. In a way that maybe wasn't possible before. But we still see that for certain problems related to, mathematics, complicated mathematics, it's maybe better to like rely on traditional software experience. At least that's my opinion from what I've experienced so far. But I think like, yeah, those who know whether you're actually developing with AI or you're just using an AI tool as a user, like you will be much more productive if you use AI generally than that don't. And that may not be the case in isolated incidents today, right across the board, but I'm pretty confident that like as time goes on, that will definitely be the case, right? If you don't get on board with this technology and you don't use it, at some point you are going to be way behind the curve.
Yeah, mate, awesome answer. I mean, I've probably 10x, my effectiveness just in my business, and I don't use tech. I'm just career coach, but I can now give in-depth summaries as long as I've listened to what they say and things, and people have something really tangible to walk away with. I can build a workshop in a day that used to take me 2 weeks, especially because I'm the king of procrastination. And the other day, chat actually told me off and told me to stop overthinking, which I thought was fascinating, and I couldn't really argue with it. So, cool, mate. So I've got about two questions left for you. And a question that I kind of like to ask everybody is, what advice would you give somebody that kind of, doesn't have any tech experience? They're, working still in marketing or something like that. What do they need to do in the next 6 months to a year to really kind of position themselves in today's market? I know you said, look, we're not sure, but I think the reality is we all have an understanding it's changing. We don't understand that rapid changing. What do they need to know? What should they be focusing on? Even if you just, said like these three things here that I would recommend you looking in or leaning into and being curious about.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, yeah, while it's clear that we can't know with certainty how the future looks like, it doesn't mean you shouldn't prepare, right? There's definitely, don't get me wrong, there is definitely a way to better prepare for this future or the variety of futures that we may face versus not preparing at all or preparing in a way that just doesn't make sense. And so, from my perspective, like the best way to prepare is, well, if somebody doesn't, if they're not aware of tech or they haven't been involved in it, one, ask yourself like, to what degree do you see yourself being involved with this technology, and to what degree do you want to be? I would never advise anyone to learn anything on this planet, whether it's like coding or surfing or whatever, if they're not generally interested in it. So you have to have an interest, I think. No, like after that, like I would say, start learning like what you want, figure out specifically what you would like to do, like create a learning objective, try if possible to make it smart, right? So like time bound, uh, and specific. And that might be great if you can get it done to like, I want to pick up these hard tech skills and I want to do course XYZ by this date, and I want to do that because I want to be XYZ. That's awesome. It's not always so easy or straightforward for most people, but I would just say like, take baby steps. Like I'm a big believer in like the incremental improvement. So you don't need to learn how to software develop or become a data scientist or work with machine learning in 2 days, right? Like that, and it wouldn't make sense for you to try and do so anyway. It's completely impossible. But like try to uh, get started. So use, in the case of AI, like start using foundational models in your day to day, even in your personal life. Um, if you aren't already at work, then when you do start using it for work, like figure out like which parts you are getting the most use from it. And if you're then really interested in it and you want to move on to not just using AI, but starting to build things or shape things with it, then I would say that's the point at which you should consider like looking at courses whether those are free online courses, that you can take at your own pace, or something like a boot camp, which maybe has more structure around it, right? Like personally, think about how you learn best. I personally learn best in the context of something like a course with structure with others around me who are doing it at the same time, and that's why I opted for the boot camp. But then once you find like that course and you have more clarity on like what you want to do with the technology and what your ultimate objective is, then I think it becomes clearer, I suppose. So I would just say like again, going back to those other skills in one of the earlier questions, like figure out what you want to learn and why you want to learn it. Make sure you're interested in it as well, but just then keep learning, like keep learning with it, and see things through and find ways to practically use the skills that you pick up. It will never stop. Like there is already so much, 2 months ago, we didn't have like Claude which is a mock bot. And then people, that was like a big step change, right? And everyone has to go and read all about that. So, but I would say like, don't be overwhelmed by getting to that endpoint too quickly. Just like baby steps, use AI first. Think about the tech skills you need. Think about whether it's interesting for you to pick those up, and then everything else should fall into place.
Awesome answer. I'm saying that because I coach on the basis of everything you've just said, so I love it. I think that, for me, what I'm kind of getting through this is kind of three things. So one is curiosity. I think, today you just be curious, just go out there and play. You don't have to, have the end goal, this will turn into a job, but just, get out there and understand it. The next one was kind of skill stacking. So that incremental improvement, small over time. And then I think really kind of the final one for me is fast-paced learning. Is that ability to kind of adapt to change, and as new things come along, lean back into that curiosity. So cool. All right. So we're going to finish this off with one last question, and I think this ties really into what you've just said a minute ago. Is kind of what's the mindset that somebody needs to have if they're about really succeeding in terms of tech, or even after today. I don't think it's about really necessarily going to tech. I think there's multiple roles that will use tech in some capacity, but what's the thought process and the mindset that they really need to kind of to go on to become one of the people that you said that's sitting on this kind of positive way?
Yeah, I think like you just need to I come back to learning again. Like you need to be curious, as you say, and you need to be consistent with your learning. So look, ideally, you have like you create time in your life, whether that's work time, part of work time that you set aside for like development and learning more, or time outside of work that you want to do so. You need to be a curious and active learner, and you need to also want to solve problems and show initiative to do so, like by yourself, and have the grit to see through some of that stuff, because it's not all straightforward. So it's like learning, a combination of learning, hard work, and consistency. I would say these are the defining traits, I would say, that set people up, in my experience, as better learners, and therefore probably stand a better chance of like picking up stuff like new tech quicker. Um, I'd also just say like as a last thing, is maybe less a mindset thing, but I think why you want to be in that mindset, why it's so important is, as I mentioned before, we don't know how the future goes, but if you have a strong fundamental skill set, right? So if you are a good logical thinker, and you add these tech skills around it, like you can pivot like multiple different ways. And if you can understand as well, like businesses and the needs of, have also some experience in solving problems for businesses, or in whatever domain background that maybe you already traditionally have that isn't related to tech, I think then you have a lot of potential, because you have multiple knowledge areas sort of overlapping, which usually gives you a unique edge over maybe some other people. But as I said, the key thing is really you don't know how the future is going to be and how the development of this technology plays out in society. But if you have strong fundamentals and you have that mindset that we spoke about, then you can do it for sure. I am convinced that like most people on this planet can learn most things. And now we are actually in a time where you actually have the most amount of free information that you ever had at your fingertips, whether it's like tech blogs, or stuff like YouTube for learning stuff. Like it's all there, right? You also then have boot camps like Wagon as well. So yeah, if you have that mindset and you focus on like developing that like broad base around something, a problem that maybe you're passionate about solving, then I think you're set up well to pivot whatever happens with this technology.
Awesome. We're going to leave it there because I'm going to go and sign up to some boot camp somewhere. I genuinely, the purpose I said at the beginning, the context of this is because I really want to help people kind of understand. Okay, this to me is one of the, and I haven't said anything today, but it's all about you, is one of the most honest, raw kind of perspectives that I've heard. It's real, it's honest, and yeah, really big thank you from myself. I've learned a lot today. I'm actually quite excited. I'm definitely on the optimistic side, and I think that was a really important part of this conversation. But I genuinely think you may have created more questions than answers for some people, but that's part of this curiosity, that's part of this learning, this part of this kind of, I think you said it beautifully, hard work. And I think that's what you can't remove from this conversation is if you do the work, and it's not necessarily doing a course or online course, it's really thinking about you, really understanding where you want to go, what you need to do, and then having some fun with it. That's the crux of this. So Conor, look, is there anything else, any advice you'd give, or are we happy to end it here? I thought the last two questions were absolutely fantastic, so I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for today.
Yeah, no worries. No, I think that's pretty much it.
Beautiful, mate. Thank you very much for your time.